Hello everyone, back tuning in today's video. Going to have a look at the weather next week to 10 days in today's video. Going to start off with central England temperature. It's reached nearly 3 degrees above average, but this could well be the high point of the month, because actually it's going to turn a little bit more unsettling cooler, particularly as we go through into next week. And this morning the GFS was indicating a little bit of a northerly shot actually for next week, and I'll show you the detail on that in a moment. So we'll start off with the central England temperature. This is it from Hadley. We currently stand at 8 degrees, 8.0, which is an anomaly of nearly 3 degrees above average, 2.8 degrees above the 61 to 1990 average, and that is provisional up to yesterday, 15th of March. So it's been a very mild, if not warm, start to March, first half to March. But as I said, I think we will see that ticking down. And we might get a little bit of an odd situation this month, where the first half comes out warmer, maybe quite significantly so, than the second half, which is quite unusual because March is typically a rapidly warming month. So you expect it to be significantly warmer in the second half compared to the first half. But we might be doing things a little bit different this year. Of course, this very mild March follows on from the very mild February, which came out at 6.1, an anomaly of over 2 degrees above average. January, though, was closer to average, very much around the 61 to 990 average, which, if you was to compare that to, say, 81 to 2010, it was actually a little bit colder than average in January. So these are the 500 millibar height anomaly flow charts for the next week to 10 days. This is going to take us to around the 26th of March, so we'll be heading up towards the end of the month with this. We've got the ECMWF here on the top, and the GFS, which we'll have a look at in a moment, is on the bottom. 500 millibars, 8,000 feet, is an area in the atmosphere, high pressure, low pressure, being drowned by the jet stream. On these charts, red is extrapolating to high pressure, and blue extrapolates to low pressure. So we see that the ECMWF is predicting an area of above average heights to be extending through the Atlantic into the UK and then heading off into eastern parts of Europe. We've got a cut-off trough down to the south with this blue area just here. That could bring some very wet weather to Spain and Portugal, by the way, next week. If you're off there, could turn really very unsettled indeed. For us, that is a more settled scenario, but it's a little bit cooler. We are bringing the air through from the east, which of course in March, easterly winds aren't going to be terribly inspiring. They'll drag in a lot of cloud, probably fairly cool temperatures as well. Not necessarily all that cold. I think there is still a bit of a southerly component coming up with those easterly winds. But I would have thought quite chilly, cloudy, maybe fairly dampish. And if the sky is clear, I suspect you will get night frost with that. Now, as I say, the GFS has pulled down quite a northerly shot on this morning's midnight run. So it's the same idea as the GFS, but it's all in a slightly differently placed. So instead of having that trough cut off over Spain and Portugal, it's extending through the western parts of Europe. And then we've got this ridge, of course, that instead of being centred more or less over the UK, is out to the west and to the northwest as well. And the upshot is that we do something like that with the jet stream, and we start to pull down quite cold air from the north. So it's a very similar scenario to what the ECMWF is doing, but it's significantly colder, and it's probably a little bit of an outlier. I would suspect that the ECM is closer to how this is going to pan out, but the GFS can't be discounted. Of course, it is a possibility. I think we'll be turning the temperatures cooler through the course of next week. These are the GFS temperature and precipitation ensembles for the next 2 weeks. The red line here is the 30-year upper air temperature average. So a little bit cooler as we go through tomorrow and into the start of the weekend. But essentially, for the next 3 or 4 days, it's milder than average. We get through into next week, though, we do see a drop in the temperature, and that's sustained over quite a few days, actually, through the course of next week. So it does look significantly cooler next week. It might not turn particularly cold. There are one or two GFS ensemble members that do turn it genuinely cold through the course of next week, but they don't look all that well supported. I would suspect cooler through the course of next week, with some rain initially and then probably a drying trend as we go through into the second half of next week. The end of March, this period just here, does show a little bit of a recovery in temperature then. For precipitation, plenty of dry weather coming up through the next day or so, but into the weekend and next week, looks like it's turning more unsettled. It's not desperately wet, but there will be more in way of rain around through the course of next week, I think, with those cooler temperatures. Temperature anomalies then are cooling down. This is from the 16th through to 24th of March, today through to next Friday, and we are still a little bit milder than average, but these are trending cooler day by day compared to how they were at the start of this week. So for the next week, still a little bit milder than average, but not as much, and trending cooler through the course of next week. Precipitation looks a little bit wetter than average, so cooler and more unsettled is the message today from the GFS. This is the temperature anomaly for North America. Eastern parts of America still hanging on to those cold temperatures that we've had for a little while now. So for the next week, 16th, 24th of March, looks like we're still remaining cold on average in the eastern part of America, significantly milder than average, warmer than average out in the west. This is the midnight run of the GFS then, and we see for Monday we're in this westerly flow. Looks quite flat. There's probably going to be some spells of rain coming in with that. We go over into Tuesday, still looking very unsettled, and then we've got a rather complex situation setting up on Wednesday as this area of low pressure begins to sink southwards to our west. So as that low pressure sinks way to the south, it will just be producing showers or longer spells of rain probably through the middle part of next week. But as it sinks down to over the country, then eventually goes to the south, we begin to pull the winds in to the north or the northeast. So by the time we get through to the end of next week, it's a slow old process, but by the time we get through to the end of next week, we are pulling down a proper northerly wind there. You follow the isobars back, the air is originating from a very long way north, somewhere up here, which is up over North Pole, and that's all pushing down across the country. So that would be a genuinely cold northeasterly wind, and it would certainly be enough to bring significant light frost. I suspect it would also be enough to be producing snow showers, especially in the north and the east. There's the upper air temperature showing the -10 isotherm is getting in across Scotland. That's genuinely cold, wintry air coming south across the country. You can see the reason for that is that it is a long fetch, sort of northerly, with the air originating right from the North Pole. Now, it doesn't take too long to cut the worst of that northerly wind off. So by the final weekend of March, it's Saturday 25th, we're beginning to topple this high pressure in from off the Atlantic, and that high pressure settling down at today 10, which takes us to Sunday the 26th. Sunday 26th of March. So we cut off that northerly, we would lose the risk of wintry showers, but I suspect there would still be an ongoing risk of quite significant and maybe quite hard overnight frost, because the upper air temperatures still look pretty cold, especially so in the southeast, although by day 10 it is beginning to turn a little bit milder up across Scotland. That's a midnight run of the GFS. This is the very latest 6 o'clock run, and it's a similar idea, but the way we sink this low pressure southwards is slightly different through the middle part of next week. So instead of pulling in a northeasterly, we actually pull in an easterly, which isn't overly cold really. The air with that is originating from somewhere like Germany. It is significantly cooler compared to what we've had through much of March, but it isn't that long fetch northerly from the Arctic that the midnight run was going for. And then into the final weekend of March, similar idea to build the high pressure in, but this time the high pressure finishes over Scandinavia. So again, we're pulling in easterly winds, which again, they aren't desperately cold, but they're certainly significantly cooler compared to what we've had through much of March, and then probably be dragging in a lot of cloud as well. Finally, the ECMWF is looking like this. So again, start next week, it looks unsettled with westerly winds. Those westerly winds continue into middle part of next week. There's the low pressure beginning to slide down across the country on Wednesday into Thursday. We're trying to turn the wind into the north, but it isn't that long fetch northerly that we saw on the GFS. So that idea that the midnight run of the GFS had for a real northerly shot of Arctic origin air looks a little bit isolated, I think, within the GFS ensembles and within the other model output. It looks a little bit isolated, probably a little bit over the top. This is very similar to the 6 o'clock run of the GFS, actually. We build this high pressure in, get the wind into the east, which would be quite a chilly wind. It would be a very cool wind and probably dragging in a lot of cloud as well. And then the high pressure just sits over the country for the final weekend of March. That would be reasonably pleasant by day with sunny spells, but by night I think the air is quite cold still there, so I suspect you will get night frost. And for the south, there is quite an easterly wind blowing. That's probably bringing in a fair amount of cloud. That's how the upper air temperatures look on day 10. Nothing desperately cold, but certainly a lot of cloud in the southmost easterly winds, and I suspect it is probably chilly enough on the surface to be producing night frost. So I think after a very mild, if not warm, first half to March, the second half is looking cooler. Now, how cool we get is really quite uncertain. That midnight run of the GFS was producing a real northerly plunge, but I think it was probably a bit over the top, and there's not a great deal of support for that within the GFS ensembles and from the operational run of the GFS, the latest one, and also from the East End of the US. So I think that's probably a bit over the top, but I think we will turn it cooler through the course of next week. Initially, we go for a very unsettled phase through the early and middle part of next week, with probably quite a lot of rain and showers around. Then we get this cooler interlude coming along in the second half of next week, which is probably associated with drier conditions as well. We'll rule out the chance of wintry showers in the north, and I think the main issue as we go through the second half of next week and then the final weekend of March will probably be an increasing risk of night frost rather than anything desperately snowy. I don't think we'll get that, but I think an increasing risk of night frost later next week, which could be quite damaging. We are getting on into the spring now, and you would hope we're starting to get milder nights for the gardens and for farmers and for wildlife. So could be a little bit damaging if we start to see frost coming along later next week. It's JMA Friday tomorrow. That'll take us through into the middle part of April. So come back for that tomorrow. But that's all for now, and thanks for watching.